Hello Titans. In this video, I want to give you a quick overview of the preterite tense. You already have all these notes. There's nothing to take notes over, but judging on how last week's assignments went, I think a lot of you could do with a good review of all of the different forms. There's a lot of knowledge in your little green flip book, so let's walk through it. Preterite. Preterite is past tense. It's for an action that was done once or a very specific number of times. Our regular verbs get these endings. These are our regular preterite endings. Pay attention to the accent marks. And these are our regular ER and IR endings. ER and IR share the same endings. They're not separate endings. Again, pay attention to the accent marks. For AR, the LAF form is just an O. For ER and IR, it's IO, and the O's have accent marks for both of them. Car, gar, zar is what we talked about last week. These are verbs that end in car, gar, or zar, like tokar, yegar, or almorzar. These are only irregular in the yo form. Some of you were trying to put these in all sorts of different forms, but it's only the yo form that's going to be irregular. So for example, tokar, our yo form would be toke. Yegar, the yo form would change to yege. For almorzar, the yo form would change to almorse. But the rest of the forms, all the other 5 forms, are going to be completely normal. Just normal AR verbs. Don't put in an extra Q or an extra U or a C instead of a Z. It's only the yo form. Some irregulars that we've learned previously are dar, which is the one that's an AR verb, but it puts on the ER and IR endings, and there's no accent marks. Ver, which is almost normal, but there's no accent marks. Ir and ser, which are obviously very irregular, and they do not have accent marks either, and they share a verb. So fui is I went or I was. Fuiste, you went or you were. And then aser is irregular in a bunch of different ways. Aser, it changes A to I, so it almost should really go in that irregular stem category because it is an irregular stem of HIC, and it has those same endings as our irregular stem category. There's no accent marks, it has a jumble of endings, and the LAF form has a Z in it. Our sandal verbs. This was confusing a lot of you last week as well. So for sandal verbs, we have 3 categories. We have E to I, O to U, and I to Y. These only change in the bottom 2 forms. That's why we call them sandals. It's just those bottom 2, the flat bottom part of the forms. So with these, this is a list of some of the ones that we've learned so far. Just to show you an example, for E to I, it's only those bottom ones. The top 4 do not change because they are sandal verbs. Only the LA usted and the AOS AS ustedes forms change E to I. O to U, same idea, but that O, of course, changes to a U. And then I to Y is what we reviewed last week. This is a little bit trickier because not all of these have an I, but you have to think back to our preterite endings. So if you think back to the preterite endings, these are all ER and IR verbs. And so it's going to be those bottom 2 forms. It's the I in the verb ending that changes to a Y. So even for verbs like leer that don't have an I in them, it is from the endings. So L-E-I-O accent mark would be what this was, but they decided they didn't like that many vowels being together, so we drop that and we add in the Y. Notice the rest of these guys do not have Ys. They are just normal ER-IR verbs. And then the last one to talk about is irregular stems. So these are ones that we focused on in the last chapter. Showing you a list of these. The DIJ, estuve, pood, tuve, soup. A lot of you struggled with remembering these because they are a little bit tricky, and they have irregular endings that go with them. They do not follow those first 2 endings that I showed you at the beginning. So these are our new endings. It's kind of a mashup of AR endings and ER and IR endings. I would encourage you, before you do, or as you go through the activities for this week, as you're conjugating verbs, to look at the verb that's given to you and think, is this irregular? Because most of the verbs I'm going to give you are going to be irregular. Not every verb in Spanish is, but we've learned a lot of irregulars, and I want you to practice with those. So if you're looking through and it says something like destruir in the yo form, think destruir. Okay, which tab is that under? Get your green flip book out and flip through it and try to maybe find that verb. If you can't find it, chances are it's a normal verb. Destruir happens to be an I to Y, and so hopefully that should be in your list. But I would encourage you for each one, treat it as an irregular suspect and think, how is this irregular? It may not be, but most of them are going to be in the activities I'm giving you because I want you to practice those. If you have questions, don't be afraid to ask. Good luck.